start with it. Cannibals first. Oh boy. Oh god. Cannibal. Okay. Maybe what we should do is here. I'm gonna look up all these traits, and then we're gonna read them. So they get no mood penalty for observing fresh corpses or human butchering, and they get bonuses for mood bonuses for stuff made out of human skin. They get a 15 plus mood bonus after eating a meal made with human flesh, and a plus 20 mood bonus after eating raw human flesh. So there's no negative. There's actually no negative to cannibalism as a trait. Honestly, I don't do a lot of cannibal runs. I feel like if you do cannibal runs, it's probably an amazing trait. I think it kind of depends, right? For me, if I see somebody that has one, I'm going to go with it doesn't bother me because there is no negatives to it. There's no negatives. And not being able to see rotting corpses and not care about it, that's actually really important. So I'm going to say doesn't bother me. It's not something I would consider solid where I'm like, oh, good. To me, it doesn't bother me. Next up is kind. They sometimes tell others kind words, plus 5 mood bonus for anyone who's been told kind words by this colonist. Will not slight or insult others. Opinion of other pawns not changed by beauty or on a disfigured pawn. Okay. Kind, in my opinion, is a solid trait. I can't put it in the amazing category because it's not something that when I see it, I'm like, oh man, we got to go get this pawn. That is a nice to have though. It is a really, really, again, there's no negative consequences to having a kind pawn. Jealous, a -8 mood penalty for not having the best bedroom. I'm going to put jealous into not a deal breaker category. Because again, it is annoying to deal with, but if they had other good traits, I'm not going to turn them away because you can deal with it. You can. If you just give them the best bedroom, you can deal with it. Now, having multiple jealous people is a problem. You just have to keep their bedrooms equal. Yeah, Rue, you can. It just gets real. That gets real in the weeds, though. You know what I'm saying? What's up, Rue? It's good to see you. It just gets greedy's a lot easier to deal with. All of this like comes with a massive disclaimer of like it depends on the kind of run that you're doing, it depends on your play style, it depends on all of the other traits that this pawn has, you know, their skills, all of that stuff, right? So it's a constant thing, but we're just kind of looking at them as objectively as we can. It's a tough thing to do, but industrious. Global work speed is plus 35%. However, they get a -5 opinion of all colonists without the same trait. So there's a massive positive to it, but there is a kind of a negative that could impact other things. Now, if they were industrious and kind, that combination is awesome because then they probably won't. But if you have that -5, they might get into more social fights. They might get into more, you know, like there just might be more issues. So as it stands as a trait on itself, I kind of want to put it in amazing, but I think it's just the global work speed is really nice. But to me, if I see it, I think it's a solid trait. It's kind of like right in between, but I think it's a solid trait. I've really never had any negative issues with it, I don't think, but maybe I have and I don't even know. Steadfast, it means they have a -9% mental break threshold, which is great. That means they're less likely in general to have a mental break because they are more steadfast. Again, I think it's a solid trait. There's no negatives to it. If I see someone who's steadfast, I'm going to be more likely to want to get them because that's a solid trait. That's not an amazing trait in my opinion, but it is a solid one. Psychically sensitive. They have a plus 80, plus 40% psychic sensitivity. So if you take out the DLC, just, within the base game, that essentially means that where they're going to be affected is when there's psychic drones. They're going to have they're going to get more of a negative debuff when a psychic drone hits. If I see it, I'm like, it's kind of a bummer. But again, not a deal breaker, because it's only at certain times where it actually impacts them. And there's ways to combat it as well. Pessimist has a -6 mood penalty constantly. Okay. I really, really, really hate the negative mood penalties all the time for no reason. I'm putting this into absolutely not. It's close to not a deal breaker. It is, but I think I have to put it in absolutely not, because when I see it, I get irritated immediately. I'm putting it in absolutely not. I can see how you think it's not a deal breaker, and I think it hovers in between those two categories, or those two tiers to me. But I really think that I find it so obnoxious that I don't want it. So I'm putting it in absolutely not. Like, this is all pure gut instinct personally for me, right? Your tier list might look different, but gut check for me when I see a pawn that if we're gonna do a naked brutality start and I'm clicking through, my gut instinct is like, I don't want it. I just don't want to deal with it. So I'm putting it in absolutely not. Night Owl. Night Owl's next. I think Night Owl's a pretty easy one. It doesn't bother me. Night Owl's here, we'll read out what Night Owl is. -10 mood penalty if awake during the day, meaning 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. Plus 16 mood bonus if awake during the night, 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. Plus there's no mood penalty for being in the dark. I think you could argue that Night Owl is actually a very solid trait. If you can keep them awake and sleeping during the right times, not having the dark, it actually should be a solid trait. I think the problem with Night Owl, and it might be just how I play the game, is that it's very hard sometimes, again, earlier in a run, to keep Night Owl happy all the time, because it's such a swing, right? So if they're awake at night and you have that plus 16, great. But if you wake them up, or they, you're awake for a battle, or they have to be up for some reason, which happens, right? That's a massive swing. And I think what ends up happening is, I think I put it in the doesn't bother me category, because I can't always keep that Night Owl in that time frame. Psychopath trait. All right. So with Psychopath trait, there's no mood penalty for observing fresh corpses, human butchering, organ harvesting, unburied colonists, prisoners sold into slavery, relatives dying, or a bonded pet dying. 7 regular mood penalties that they will not have because of the trait. That's pretty solid. Now, they don't get mood bonuses from friendly chats or being nuzzled, and they don't get opinion gains from friendly interactions. Honestly, because the reality is like, the no mood bonuses from friendly chats. Okay. No opinion gain from friendly interactions. I mean, I guess what I don't really know. So they don't get any mood boost from socializing. So are they more likely to get into social fights because they really can't make friends? That's what I don't know, and it doesn't say here in the wiki. Because from my understanding, those negatives are not actually that negative. The colonists can get other friendly interactions with other people. I'm going to put Psychopath. I could really put it in doesn't bother me, but I'm gonna put it as a solid trait. I think it's a solid trait because there's so many negative things that happen, especially early game, like unburied colonists, bodies laying around, you know, relatives dying. Like, there's a lot of that happens, especially in some of our recent playthroughs. I think it's a solid trait because that just, if you can eliminate those negative debuffs, it's very helpful. So I'm gonna put it as a solid trait. All right, so this is chemical fascination. Has a chemical need a mood buff up to +6 when satisfied, and a mood debuff up to -12 when not. Will take drugs for recreation regardless of drug policy and chemical need. Note, this only applies when a pawn are allowed recreation and recreational drugs. This will otherwise follow the drug policy regarding drugs carried and scheduled in addiction bonuses. Note, the colonists will still respect allowed areas and will not use forbidden stacks of any drug regardless of chemical need. Unless they go on a mental break. I don't use a lot of drugs in my colony. I think this is a complete play style situation. It's a situational thing. I'm putting it in absolutely not. Because that -12 is constant if they don't get drugs. Then they go on a mental break. Then they take the drugs if they're there. Then they start getting addicted. Then they blah, blah, blah. Forget it. I don't want to deal with it. It's one of my least favorite traits. It's up there with depressive, to be honest. It's up there. Because it essentially is like having a -12 forever. If you don't make drugs for them, it is essentially like having a depressive all the time. Ugly. It is a -1 to pawn beauty. So this will subtly impact or repel people in social interactions. So I guess the downside of them being ugly is that they will potentially get into more social fights. To me, doesn't bother me. If a pawn is ugly, it's not a make or break. Optimist, permanent +6 mood bonus. You know, honestly, as an outside trait, I have to put this in amazing because it could be a solid, and I guess you could put like iron. You could put sanguine into amazing, but +6 all the time for no good reason. There's nothing else to it. It's just a +6 always. That's great. That's an incredible trait to have any time of the colony, whether you're in the beginning, at the end, in any situation. It has to go in the amazing category. Abrasive. Has a tendency to slight and insult people. -15% of the market value. Oh, interesting. I did not know that. So they are less valuable if you were to sell them like to a slaver. So again, more likely to start a social fight. Probably more likely when they have a mental break to go on an insulting spree, which can be not great. I would say abrasive to me is not a deal breaker. I find it obnoxious when I see them, like when I see that trait come up, I find it obnoxious, but I'm not going to not take a pawn because they're abrasive. I wouldn't say it doesn't bother me. It does bother me because I do think about the interactions. I think you could either put them in either category, but I'm going to put it in not a deal breaker. Hard worker. Hard worker is like the less valuable industrious. Global work speed +20%, -5 opinion of all colonists without the same or industrious trait. Again, it's one of those where I see it and I go, oh, hard worker, nice. But you know, that -5 opinion of all colonists without the same trait, that can actually be a negative. And I really, yeah, that's something I don't really think about. Nervous. It only has a negative penalty. A plus 8% to their mental break threshold. So it's the exact opposite of Steadfast. In fact, it's worse than Steadfast because Steadfast is actually better because it's a -9. This is a +8. Again, it's one of those where it's like, that's a bummer. But you can balance their moods in other ways. Psychically dull. -50% psychic sensitivity. The only place it's not positive is when you get a psychic soothe. So if they're psychically dull, they won't get as much benefit from the psychic soothe. Or if you hit like a psychic soothe pulsar, they won't get as much of a benefit. But on the other hand, when you have a psychic drone, they won't get as much of a negative boost. So it has the same drawback as it does perk. It does. My opinion is I think it's a solid trait. I think it's a solid trait because if they don't get as much of a boost, it is kind of a neutral though. But I think when I see it, I go, ooh, psychically dull. Because again, that negative debuff is so much more valuable to not have than like in a psychic drone. If you have someone who's psychically dull, that could be the difference between that pawn breaking and that pawn not breaking and wrecking something. So I'm going to put it in solid. Great memory. Again, it's another only positive trait. It is 50% skill loss rate. So meaning when a pawn learns something, and then so if they're doing a job where they're gaining their traits, right? Why am I having such a hard time describing this? When they're not doing that job, they lose points of that learned skill slowly, normally at 100% rate. This, they would lose that half. They lose it, they forget it half as slow. Wait, they have a description. He or she will lose unused skills at half the rate of other people. There we go. You got it. I'm gonna put great memory in solid. Again, you have to put it in a solid category. It's only a positive trait. I don't think it's amazing. I don't take it as amazing, but I do think it's a solid trait. Chemical interest. A lot like, so chemical interest is like the lesser bad chemical fascination. They have a chemical need, mood buff up to +3, so not as good as chemical fascination, which is a +6. When they're satisfied, and they get a mood debuff up to -6 when not. So technically speaking, it's not as big of a swing. It's not as big of a swing than chemical fascination. But again, if you're using chemicals, if you're using drugs in your colony, it can be fine. And to me, because I don't actually use a lot of it, it's a negative. I'm putting chemical interest in absolutely not. No. If I see it, I hate it immediately. I think you could say it's not a deal breaker. I just don't want to deal with it. I don't want to deal with it. So for me, it's absolutely not. I think I have a very negative bias of drugs in Rimworld, which is actually something that I'd like to do in a future playthrough. I always have. But I also know that there are positives to drug stuff. Bisexual. Will have romantic relationships with people from either gender. Pretty self-explanatory. Again, I think this is doesn't bother me. I think you could actually put this into not a deal breaker, only because they're going to flirt with people from both sexes. And since most of your pawns will probably also not be bisexual, it's actually a fairly rare trait. I don't see this trait a whole lot in pawns. It can be a pretty negative trait though, because they're going to get rejected by not only their same sex, but the other sex as well. So they're just, I think it can be, and those are pretty strong debuffs when they get like rebuffed by people. It's a debuff for both pawns too. That's true, Drew. That's true. I think I'm gonna leave it into it doesn't bother me though, only because again, I'm trying to go with my gut here. If I see a trait, I'm trying to reflect on like, what do I automatically think? In my head, I'm like, depressive. Permanent minus 12 mood penalty. Absolutely not. It's my least hated. It's my most hated trait in a pawn. Again, there's nothing you can do. Like, you can counteract it. Like, you could give them a really nice room. You can make them happy in other ways. But if they don't, it opens yourself up. No, it's gone. It's so hard to overcome. Minus 12, always, right? If they're in a nice room, that's temporary. They're going to walk to another room, or they're going to be in a battle, or they're going to, whatever, right? They're going to be mining, and maybe they don't love mining. That negative 12 will always come back. Staggeringly ugly. So this is like ugly, but it's a -2 for pawn beauty. If I put ugly and doesn't bother me, I'm going to put staggeringly ugly and not a deal breaker. It's not. Like, if I look at it and I go, that's going to cause some problems, but I'll take them. Okay, so Pyromaniac, +5 mood. But now this is something interesting, and I did not know this. I did not notice this. +5 mood bonus for having an incendiary weapon equipped. I did not know that. So you could equip them with Molotovs and get a +5. And then just like equip them with a different weapon when you want them to fight. Huh. So, negatives. They're incapable of firefighting. That can be hard. That's again, Pyro's kind of a tricky one. You don't want that in right away, especially if you're doing like a solo run. That's tough. Only possible extreme. Okay, so here we go. The mood bonus to Pyros is relatively new. It is Mortal Smurf. Okay. Because I didn't think that was always there. They use the weapons during their breaks. I don't think so, Drew. No, if they mental break into Pyro, I don't think they're throwing Molotovs around. No. Now, this is a big one too. Only positive extreme mental break is a fire starting spree. The only extreme mental break. So that means they won't kill animals. They won't murder colonists. If you have several other colonists who can put out fires, it really doesn't last that long as a mental break. And it's just not that bad. To me, it's not that bad. Now, they will randomly have fire starting sprees with a mental break threshold of 50 days. Wait, MTB? What does that mean? Mean time between. Oh, okay. Mortal Smurf. Thank you. So regardless of mood. So every 50 days, they will start a fire regardless of their mood. Okay. They also have a minus 20% reduction in market value if you were to like trade them to a slaver or whatever. So it's actually quite a bit. There's quite a bit of stuff in there. On average, it's 50 days. Yeah. Here's what it is to me. To me, it's not a deal breaker. It isn't. I don't see it as a necessarily like a positive. I also find a lot of times, and I think the reason I don't think it's a deal breaker is a lot of times I find that Pyros will sometimes have other positive traits that are really good. Maybe I've just been lucky. I don't know. But to me, it's not a deal breaker. All right, next up, gay. Gay is a lot like bisexual. Will only have romantic relationships with people of the same gender. Okay. Right. It's pretty... This one doesn't take a lot. That's all it is. Again, it doesn't bother me. It could be not a deal breaker. It's the same as bisexual to me. Tortured Artist, -8 permanent mood. A 50% chance of receiving the mental inspiration, inspired creativity after a mental break ends. Now, I've had tortured artists that are not even creative. They don't have a great art skill. I don't use them for art. I don't use art enough to make this valuable. And I think it sucks. No, it's a bad one. No, I'm not doing it. If I see a tortured artist as one of my first things, it's a -8. That's all I see. -8. I don't care about the inspired creativity. No, forget it. You're out. It's done. Teetotalers will not go on binges. Will not go on binges. They cannot be directed to take non-medical drugs. Force administering the drug will cause a -20 mood penalty. So if you give them like Psychoid, they'll get a -20 mood penalty. Now, where teetotaler can be tough is they have a -25 opinion of any pawns with chemical interest or fascination. So if you are a drug run person, teetotaler is the worst trait probably for you to have in your colony. This is another pretty controversial or very polarizing trait, depending on your playstyle. If I have to go with my gut, when I see teetotaler, I think, ooh, good. I do. I'm going to put it in solid for me. I don't leverage drugs in the game. Yeah, this list is different because I don't use drugs. And that's why I think I want to do like a drug run where we like intentionally use them so I can learn more about them. I don't use them enough to maximize the benefits, and I always have only seen the negatives. So I'm putting it in solid. Iron-Willed. Mental break threshold, -18%. So double steadfast. Iron-Willed is an amazing trait. I think you could also put steadfast as an amazing trait too. But Iron-Willed, like, there's no negatives to it. They're not going to break as often as the rest of your pawns. Psychically hypersensitive. Plus 80% psychic sensitivity. So double what psychically sensitive is. Again, if you have a colony where there's a lot of psychic soothes running, that's great. But you get hit with that psychic drone. You get a psychic ship that you can't deal with right away. Psychically hypersensitive is pretty bad. There's so many points. This should be an absolutely not, but I'm going to put it into not a deal breaker. It really goes between these two. I'm going to put it into, because again, it's not a thing that happens all the time, but when I see it, I think that sucks. Bloodlust. All right. This is a lot. This is a lot of varying things. Okay. So I'm going to read this. Okay. There's quite a few positives, by the way, especially in Rimworld. Okay. All right. No mood penalty for observing fresh corpses, observing rotting corpses, human butchering, and organ harvesting. +3, 5, 7, or 8 mood bonus for wearing clothing made out of human skin. I don't know. Oh, maybe it stacks. So +3 if they're wearing one thing, +5 if they're wearing 2, 7, and then 8. I don't know. I need to know the negatives to bloodlust because I don't see a downside. Okay. +8 mood bonus for witnessing a stranger's death. +13 mood bonus for killing strangers. Massive in Rimworld. You are killing strangers all the time. +13. Now that doesn't last forever, obviously, but it, that's an instant mood. Now, the negative The negative is 4 times as likely to start a social fight. That's the negative. So, you know, that, I guess the reality is that if they start a social fight, you have now 2 pawns who will need to get tended. That might not seem like a big deal, but it kind of depends on when that social fight starts. So, again, that's a very situational issue. Me personally, I will go with solid. I think Bloodlust is solid. I think you could put it in amazing. Me personally, I don't view it as an amazing trait. It's not one where I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to have this pawn because they're Bloodlust. I think it's a solid. I view it as a solid trait. Undergrounder. Okay. Mood not affected by darkness. No outdoors or space needed. They do have an indoor need, though. They like being indoors. That's a negative. They get a +3 mood when indoors and a +4 when underground, meaning if they're like mining, etc. They get a -3 mood when outdoors. Again, this is sort of a variable how you play the game. If you're doing like a mountain base, Undergrounder is amazing. If you're in a non-mountain area or you're living a lot of your life as a base outside, cannot be that great. I view an Undergrounder as whatever. It doesn't bother me. It's not a, I don't, if I see it, I'm like, eh. I guess I've had like a couple occasions where like, you know, they'll break and they'll say, oh, because I was outside. And you're like, whatever. But to me, I don't view it as that positive. I also don't view it as that negative. I don't do a lot of mountain bases. I think I generally have a very generic base where I have some outdoor space, I have some indoor space. I don't really change how I play the game because of an Undergrounder. I don't feel like I really change their jobs as much. Maybe I should. To me, it's like, whatever. Nimble, plus 15% melee dodge chance and a 10% reduction in trap spring chance. Nimble is huge if you have a meleeer. I'm gonna put it in solid because agility buffs are amazing. They are. Okay, but here's the deal. Again, I'm just being as truthful to myself as possible right now. If I see Nimble pop up as a trait, I go, oh, nice. But not like, oh, man, I gotta take this pawn because they're nimble. There's the second ban. That's fine. That's fine. You know what? I've only had 2 bans today. That's pretty good. Okay, annoying voice. Only a negative trait. -25. Wow, that's higher than I thought it was. -25 opinion from other colonists. They also get a -20% of their market value when like traded or like to a slaver. This could honestly either go to doesn't bother me or not a deal breaker. I guess I really don't think about this enough. I'm gonna put it under doesn't bother me. It could go here too. Nah, I honestly, it's another one of those traits. I just don't think about it enough. Maybe I should, because a -25 opinion is not great. I'm learning some more things about some of these traits that maybe should bother me more or should bother me less. Lazy. -20% global work speed. That's it. It's just a negative trait. Lazy is going to be another not a deal breaker. Obviously, it's kind of sucks. Like, it's not something where I'm like, it's just sort of that thing where you go, I'm annoyed by that, but but it's fine. And obviously, of course, it depends if they have other traits. But if I was to look at it on its own, it's not a deal breaker for me. Volatile. Mental break threshold of plus 15%. Again, only a negative trait. It is essentially the opposite of Iron-Willed, but 3% less. So Iron-Willed is a plus 18, Volatile's a minus 15. I would, I think, originally say not a deal breaker because I can, like, Depressive is minus 12 no matter what, right? Whereas their mental break threshold, as long as I can kind of keep them happy, mental break threshold, I can manipulate that a little bit. But, you know, if they're hungry or something, nah, it's bad. It's a bad trait. I'm trying to think about like how I see it. Honestly, I'm gonna put it into absolutely not, because I do feel like if I was to lean in a direction, again, this is kind of one of those that kind of hangs over the line here. It's just, it kind of depends. I guess, yeah, I don't know. I think I'll drop it because when I do see it, I do think to myself, ugh, like I really hate that one. More so than I would say any of these. Okay, Psychically Deaf. Minus 100 psychic sensitivity. So they essentially will get no buff for a Psychic Soothe, but they will have no debuff if there's a Psychic Ship or a Psychic Drone. I'm going to put this in solid. I like that because, again, it's one of those where if I put Psychically Dull in solid, I got to put Psychically Deaf because to me, sure, they won't get that positive debuff. I'm using a Psychic Soothe pulsar a lot less than I'm freaking out about everybody breaking because we have a Psychic Ship on the map. Nudist. This is another super dependent, one because if you are doing like an ice sheet, Nudist could suck. However, a Nudist is a plus 20 mood bonus when naked. Plus 20. If you can keep them naked all the time, it is 8 points of mood better than Sanguine, which is wild. However, they do get a -3 mood penalty for wearing any apparel except headgear and utility items. I want them armored in combat. It's a little bit of a finicky sort of, it can be a little bit of a micromanagey trait, but personally, I think it's solid. I like it. I like it as a trait. Brawler. +4 melee skill, automatically. -4 shooting skill, automatically, no matter what their trait is. Obviously, they can't go below 0. +4 melee hit chance. Okay. -20 mood penalty for wielding a ranged weapon. Disallows shooting passions, disallows shoot frenzy inspiration. For me, a brawler, I could put it in solid. It kind of is a solid trait if you're gonna be able to use them as melee. For me, it's kind of a whatever. It really is like a whatever trait for me. If my meleeer is a brawler, cool. If they're not a brawler, I don't really care. Creepy breathing is exactly the same as annoying voice. The only difference is it's a -10% of their market value, whereas annoying voice is a -20%. But it is essentially the exact same as annoying voice. It is a -25 opinion from other colonists. I had no idea. I had never really looked at those numbers. I had no idea that those were essentially the same trait. Well, I view them very similarly. Doesn't bother me. Slothful. It is a global work speed of minus 35%. I'm gonna put slothful and absolutely not. That work speed, the debuff to me is worse than the positive, if that makes sense. Like, it's just, especially early game, like, it's just that pawn, everything else feels tainted because of slothful. Everything else feels tainted. It's just, I mean, it's a lot slower. When I see it, I hate it. I guess you could put it into not a deal breaker, but I think I'm gonna put it in absolutely not. Okay, neurotic. Now, this is another polarizing one because it does have a lot of positives. It does have some negatives. This is neurotic is essentially nervous, but with a positive to it. So nervous was +8 mental break threshold. That's the same as neurotic. Neurotic also has a +8 mental break threshold. However, it increases their global work speed by 20%. Honestly, though, I think if I was to be truthful, I'm going to put neurotic into doesn't bother me. The global work speed's nice, but the mental break threshold is meh. I don't value this trait enough. And maybe I don't. I don't value it positively enough. And I understand that. Super immune. Immunity gain speed plus 30%. Plus 30% immunity gain. Super immune is an amazing trait. Again, no negatives. Your colonist is going to get sick. They are going to they're going to get sick with the plague. They're going to get malaria. They're going to get whatever. They're 30% more likely to survive, essentially, than a regular pawn. Masochist. Okay. This is an interesting one. So a masochist gets a +5 mood bonus for being in a little pain. 10%, or I'm sorry, not percent. +5 mood bonus for being in a little pain. +10 mood bonus for being in medium pain. +15 mood bonus for being in severe pain. +20 for being in shock. So, honestly, this is a solid trait because your pawn is going to be in pain at some point. The reason it's not a negative, there's no negative to it. Like, if your pawn is hurt, they get a mood buff. If they're not hurt, they don't get a negative mood buff. It really is like, it actually should probably be an amazing trait. I don't necessarily view it as that though, so I'm gonna put it in solid. Because I don't think I view it personally as like, oh man, they're a masochist, heck yeah, I gotta take them. But maybe I should. Tough. So they take 50% less damage. They take less damage than other people from the same blows. Tough to me is an amazing trait because they're gonna get hit, and they're gonna take less damage. That means they're much more durable. They're hard to kill. That's what I want in a colonist. That's probably why I should put masochist also in amazing, but I don't. So I'm gonna do this for now. This is just how I view it. You know, when we started this versus like how I should maybe view some of these. I'm putting tough and amazing. So misandrist is a -25 opinion of men. Misogynist is a -25 opinion of women. To me, these both go in the does not bother me category. Whoops. If I can't, creepy breathing and annoying voice, I guess you could argue that they're a little bit better than annoying voice and creepy breathing because those four are essentially -25 opinions. However, misandrist and misogynist are maybe a little bit better because it's only one sex, right? So half, well, it depends on how many people you have in your colony, how many, you might have more women than men, whatever. You know, if you're in an all women colony, maybe having a, you know, a misogynist is not good, or a misandrist even. I guess I've never had enough of an issue. I think if you were to dig a little bit deeper, that annoying voice, creepy breathing, that minus 25 maybe causes more problems than you think. Jogger, move speed of plus 0.4 cells per second. I mean, a colonist that moves faster literally can save your life. I would have to put Jogger in an amazing category. Now, you might think it's only 0.4 cells per second. It's not that much. But holy crap. It's almost a half a cell a second faster than X, someone else who's not a jogger. It literally is a lifesaver. There's no negatives to it. It's so positive, in my opinion. You know, it can counteract having, you know, it can even counteract, like, if they have like a leg issue where that's slowing them down, whatever. It's, yeah. Very neurotic. Darl's favorite trait. Global work speed of plus 40%, but a mental break threshold of plus 14. Now, very neurotic is a better trait than neurotic because they double their work speed, but they do not double their mental break threshold. So neurotic is a plus 20% work speed, plus 8% mental break threshold. Very neurotic is a 40%, twice as much, but not twice as much of a mental break threshold. So I put neurotic in doesn't bother me. I would put very neurotic as a solid trait. I do not like the mental break threshold, but that work speed is pretty wild and hard to counteract. Because honestly, and I think if I was to change this, I think I probably would put neurotic into the solid category. I don't think I use these enough. I don't think I appreciate these enough as it stands. Sickly. So, there is a positive to sickly, actually. They get a medicine skill of plus 4. Now, obviously, that is super dependent. It does not guarantee them passions. It doesn't guarantee that they're actually good at medical. If the pawn's base skill is 0, that means their medicine skill is 4. They could have a double passion and be a plus 12, and then you get a plus 16. But they will randomly catch diseases independently from the rest of the colony on average once every 30 days. So twice a year on average. Twice a year on average, they will get sick with something outside of, like, you know, when your colony gets like fibrous mechanites or whatever, they're going to get something else independently. Part of me wants to put it in not a deal breaker, but I gotta say absolutely not. It's just one of those like dumb, annoying traits where you're like, they get sick and you're like, of course you just got that. And of course you're my cook, or you're my crafter, or you're my researcher who now is in bed and might die from the, you know, the plague or whatever it is. It's just annoying. Body modders get plus 4 to a plus 13 mood for having artificial body parts. So plus 4, and then it stacks to plus 13. They get a minus 4 mood penalty that does not stack. That would be, so when you get a body modder, if they don't have any artificial body parts, they will have a consistent minus 4 penalty for not having an artificial body part. They also, now hold on, They also get a +8 to a +40 at its stacked top opinion of other colonists for each part installed on them. So if you have a body modder who is in another in a colony with a ton of other colonists who also have body parts that are modified, you're giving them automatic friendship points. The only downside is when you get a body modder and they don't have one. I think body modder is an amazing trait. That's my opinion. I think it's an amazing trait because the reality is, especially if you're playing on a difficulty where like you're going to be in a lot of fights, the chances of your colonist losing a limb or missing a kidney or something, it's just pretty high. Wimp, -50% pain shock threshold. Now that does not mean they take less damage. This is different than tough. Tough halves the damage they take. Wimp decreases their pain shock threshold, meaning it takes less hits for them to go down, but they still take the same amount of damage as other people, right? They also have a -15% to their market value for being traded to a slaver or whatever. Now, you can say that Wimp you can spin Wimp to be a positive. It means they go down faster, meaning that they might not bleed as much, or when they get hit, they're going to go down so much faster. They're not going to have as much bleeding issues, and you can have more time to rescue them because they're going to go down faster. I'm going to put them in not a deal breaker, but that to me is one that I could also put into absolutely not. So Fast Walker is like Jogger, but half as valuable. So Fast Walker is a plus 0.2 cells per second movement speed. There's no downsides to it. Fast Walker's great. I don't know. Yeah, it's half as much. It's 0.2 cells. I have to put this in solid. I agree. I have to put this in solid. It's not one where I'm like, oh man, they're a Fast Walker. This is a must take pawn, and I'll ignore some of their other skills. It's still really, really good, and there's no downside to it. But it's just, I don't know. It's got to be solid. This is another one that's kind of interesting. Careful Shooter. So their aiming time is increased by 25%. So it takes them longer to aim their weapon by 25%. But it increases their shooting accuracy by +5. It's one of the... I'm going to put it in doesn't bother me. I don't see it as such a negative. Maybe I should. But to me, it's kind of one of those where it's like, I'm not going to reject a pawn because they're a careful shooter. I'm also not going to be super happy about it. Okay, so Delicate is in here. However, Delicate is a trait that seems to be added in biotech. Delicate is 115, an increase of 115% damage taken. So it's the opposite of tough. So they have fragile skin and bones. He or she takes more damage than other people from the same blows. That to me is worse than Wimp. More damage? Delicate's going into absolutely not. Wimp is one thing, but I wanted to put Wimp kind of in absolutely not, but I'm definitely putting Delicate in. That is an awful, awful trait. Not only are they going to go down faster, but they're going to take more damage and bleed out way faster. We may as well do Recluse while we're here, because Recluse is also part of biotech. Yes. So Recluse, they get a mood buff or debuff from the number of human pawns, children, guests, or prisoners in the colony. Mechanoids and pets do not count. So Recluse, if you have a solo pawn, if they're the only one, they have a plus 12 mood permanent. That's crazy. They will lose when there's 2 pawns. It goes down to a plus 8. It goes down to a plus 6 with 3. It goes down to a plus 4 with 4. 5 to 10 colonists, it stays static at 0. And then when you start getting to 11, it's a minus 2. 12 is a minus 3. 13 is a minus 4. 15 is a minus 6. And then if you have 16 or more, it's a constant minus 8. It really depends on how many people you have. It does suck if you're going to have a large colony. But if you have 5 to 10 people, if you have 10 colonists, it's essentially a net 0. So I'm just going to put this in doesn't bother me. Body Purist. This one's a fun one. It is a minus 10 to a minus 35 mood for having artificial body parts. So it's a minus 10 for 1, and it stacks to minus 35. Additionally, it is a minus 8 to a minus 40 stacked at its highest. Opinion. A minus 40 opinion of other colonists for each part installed on them. Again, if you can get through the game, the problem with Body Purist is there's no positive. Body Purist would be a better trait depending on playstyle if there was a positive trait for not having artificial body parts. But there's not. It's just nothing. It's only negative. Too Smart, you get a plus 75% global learning factor. Meaning they learn everything an additional 75% faster than other people. The downside is they have a plus 12% mental break threshold. 75% is crazy high. It is really, really high. If you keep them happy, Too Smart can be a really, really good trait. I have to put this in solid. I don't value it enough to put it in amazing, but I do like it when I see it. I don't think it's as valuable as like very neurotic, but it is still a valuable trait, I think. Just from the global learning factor. I mean, if you get, if you have a crafter who's like a double passion, but they're only like a 5, they're gonna get to making much better stuff so much faster. Asexual. This is one that this is another trait. I feel like bisexual and asexual, I don't see them a lot as traits. Maybe, again, this goes into it doesn't bother me. So asexuals may not have romantic relationships with people. To me, they're all this. It's just another one that goes into this. Like, maybe it's because I don't notice them as much. They won't have romantic relationships. Again, you might get negative buffs because someone who's asexual will get hit on by someone, and then they'll have to rebuff them because they're asexual. Then that person gets upset because they're, getting rebuffed, etc. But again, it's not enough of a positive or negative that I ever notice where I have to put it in either category. Slowpoke. Movement speed minus 0.2 cells per second. It also disallows the Go Frenzy inspiration, where they move faster for a period of time. Slowpoke is one that's it's not a deal breaker. It's an annoying one to me, but I don't really see it as that big of a deal. Trigger Happy is a minus 50% aiming time and a -5 to shooting accuracy. So interesting. So you get the +5 with careful shooter, but it slows you down by 25%. However, trigger happy, they shoot 50% faster in their aiming time, but they lose accuracy by -5. I was going to put that in doesn't bother me, but now I think I'm going to put it in solid, especially the way that we've been playing most recently, like with using the singularity kill box. I guess I didn't realize the aiming time was that much faster. I thought it was only like a 25%. So I don't really care about the accuracy if they're going to be shooting that much faster. 100%. Okay, I'm putting that. That was a surprising addition. I was going to put this in doesn't bother me because I felt like it didn't really do anything either way, but dang, trigger happy is kind of good. Gourmand. Plus 50% hunger rate, meaning they need to eat 50% faster than other people. They do get a +4 cooking skill. Additionally, only possible minor mental break is a food binge as long as there is food in storage. Minor mental break. The only one possible is that they'll eat more food. Fast learner. Plus 75% global learning factor. No downside. So this is essentially too smart without the plus 14% mental break. I got to put it in amazing. I mean, there's no downside to it. They're going to learn faster. They're going to do all of their skills. That is a trait that lasts forever. If I put too smart into a solid, I have to put fast learner into amazing. Because there's no downside to it. Our next one, my favorite trait, because I don't have to deal with them as much, is sanguine, a permanent plus 12 mood bonus. Always. It's an amazing trait. There's no denying it. It is plus 12. There's no negatives. There's nothing that's going to change it. Beautiful. Well, this has got to be a great trait, right? Beautiful? Like someone's really nice to look at? Gotta be a good trait. Right? Beautiful. Plus 2 pawn beauty. Hey! Plus 2. That means they're better to look at. Wow. That way, no one's gonna have a problem with them. Yeah. The debuffs, I think, from beautiful are more annoying than the debuffs from the people who are ugly. I am HO. I'm gonna go not a deal breaker. So to me, staggeringly ugly, that's why staggeringly ugly is also not a deal breaker, but worse. Beautiful is the exact same as staggeringly ugly, except it's the opposite, where people just hit on them constantly and then they're rebuffed. So not only do they get rebuffed, but both people will get a negative trait for having to rebuff person and getting rebuffed. Beautiful sucks. Pretty is plus 1 to pawn beauty. Pretty, I'm gonna put in doesn't bother me because I haven't had as much issues, but beautiful, I feel like it's a plus 1 instead of a plus 2. I'm gonna put it in here because I have ugly also in the same category, which is a -1 to pawn beauty. It's kind of the opposite. I also feel like pretty, I haven't noticed as much. I have a very maybe overly harsh view on beautiful versus pretty. Could be just how my games have played out. Could be just the pawns I've gotten. But I'm going to say, again, they're not that different. But if I see a pawn that's beautiful, I'm going to go, ugh. Versus like a pawn that's pretty, Aesthetic. Plus 5 mood bonus for having an awful bedroom. Which is great because we always have awful bedrooms in Rimworld. We can always make somebody a smaller, worse room. Making them good is harder, right? They get a -5 mood penalty for having a slightly impressive or better bedroom. Additionally, their mood is not affected by quality of meal, including raw food and nutrient paste. So you get an NPD, you give a nutrient paste. So normally a pawn who eats a nutrient paste meal gets a -4 debuff for eating a nutrient paste meal. Not only do they not care about the size of their bedroom or what it looks like, they also don't care about eating an NPD or a nutrient based meal. Additionally, pawn beauty of others does not change the pawn's social opinion of that pawn. So if you have somebody who's ugly or pretty or beautiful, it doesn't matter. They don't care either way. They're completely neutral to it. In my head, I want to put it in solid, but it actually is an amazing trait, especially considering. Now, the only downside of it is they're not going to. They don't get. So if you are feeding your colony lavish meals, they won't get a mood buff from it. So that's something to consider. I'm going to put it in a vacuum. There isn't a downside, especially considering how awful Rimworld is. What do we struggle with in Rimworld? Keeping things beautiful for our pawns and feeding them good meals so they're happy. An aesthetic pawn doesn't care about either of those. I don't like that they don't get an unbelievably impressive rec or dining room buff. Yeah, so they're missing out on some buffs, but they don't care about it if it's bad. I guess that alone kind of puts it into solid for me. Because eventually, like, your other, so 90, the rest of your colonists, as long as they're not aesthetic, are going to need good bedrooms. They're going to need good work rooms. They're going to need good rec rooms. They're going to need good food to be happy, right? You're going to want to increase their moods as much as possible. Whereas the aesthetic will not change. They will not get happier. They will only just not get less happy. So I think for that reason alone, I got to put it in solid, right? Slow learner. -75% global learning factor. It is only a negative trait. It is the opposite, quite opposite of fast learner. I'm going to put slow learner, and maybe I should make it worse. I do hate this one. I agree with you, Darl. I'm going to put it in not a deal breaker. Fast learner is an amazing trait. Slow learner seems like it should be in the opposite, right? Because it is the opposite. But at the same time, there are always going to be those colonists that you get that are like, they don't have all that many traits, or I'm sorry, they don't all have that many passions. Maybe they're not as good. It's a dependent trait, certainly on the colonist. But as an overall, I feel like I don't care about it as much. Greedy gets, so this is a little confusing how this is written. So they get a -8, -8, -8, -6, and -4 mood penalty. I don't know. There's slashes in between them. For not having a bedroom of slightly impressive or better. So I guess slightly impressive would be a -8. And then as the room improves, it would be -6 and then a -4? Or no, I guess, so the absolute worst would be a -8. And then as it gets to be more impressive, before it gets to slightly impressive, -6 and a -4. I feel like you can get an impressive bedroom fairly quickly. The greedy, jealous thing, it's not a deal breaker for me. Again, it's another one that kind of sucks, but it's not like I won't take them. So jealous is a -8 mood penalty for not having the best bedroom. Jealous is technically worse, I think, than greedy. Greedy means they just want to have a nice bedroom. That's fine. Jealous is, I want my bedroom to be the best one. That's where it gets a little more annoying than greedy. Is jealous maybe one lower than greedy? Maybe like LMS said, greedy is doesn't bother me. Yeah, actually, that's fair. That's actually very fair. Yeah, greedy isn't actually that bad. You're right. No, you're right. If I put jealous here, I think jealous is worse than greedy. And they're very similar. It's a very similar type of trait. You're right. I don't think greedy bothered. Yeah, that's fair. Because greedy you can overcome pretty easily. Quick sleeper. Again, quick sleeper is an only positive trait. It is a minus or is a plus 50% rest rate multiplier, meaning they need half as much time to sleep. So they don't need as much sleep as the average person. Whether he or she is sleeping on a bed or on the ground, they will be fully rested in about 2/3 the usual time. So it isn't. So it says plus 50% rest rate, but it's only about 2/3. There is no downside to it. I don't know if it's amazing though. It does increase, I guess, the time that they spend working because they're not having to sleep as long. But I don't think it's one that I value enough to be amazing. It is a really good. I think it's a borderline for me. I'm gonna toss it into solid. I think there's arguments for everything, but if I had to gut instinct look at a trait and say how I feel about it, this is what I would do. Whether or not I undervalue or overvalue certain traits, it's how I would look at it. So optimist, iron-willed, super immune, tough, jogger, body modder, fast learner, and sanguine. So 8 of how many traits are there? 67 traits. Now if you take out the delicate, and recluse, which are part of the those got thrown in here, but those are technically part of biotech. If you take them out, 65, there's 65 base game in 1.4 base game traits. I would take 8 of them as amazing, but still many of them that are solid. 16 that are solid. So that's 24 of the 64 traits I consider solid or better. I guess that's pretty decent. I mean, it's a fairly balanced list, really. I think I am. I think I'm gonna put this up on YouTube. I think I am, actually. I think I'll cut down this VOD, take out some of the stuff, and then we'll throw this up on YouTube. And then get yelled at in the comments section. Spicy comments, for sure. That's all dependent on playstyle. I'm gonna spice the comments right now. I turned comments off for that video.